At the February 8 General Committee meeting at City Hall, the Council deliberated for over 3 hours to decide on cutting services. As a result, Barrie residents will face a tax increase of approximately 3.07% instead of previously planned 3.95%. However, Barrie residents will face higher costs for a variety of services including water and sewage bills. Starting April 1st, Barrie Transit cash fare will be increased by 25 cents to $3.50. So seniors will still pay the discounted rate of $3. The city is scaling down its hiring. Instead of the earlier plan to hire 22 additional city employees and convert temporary positions to full-time staff, only 13 full-time staff employees will be hired. However, as planned earlier, 20 new Barrie firefighters will be hired. Residents will also pay more for their water and sewage bills. The water bill will be increased by 3.7% to an estimated $390 per year, while the sewage bill will be raised to around $560, a 5% increase. The City Council is expected to give its final approval to the operating and capital budget on February 15th. The Council has deferred budget approval for the Police Service Board, the Barrie Public Library, and the County of Simcoe to a General Committee meeting scheduled for March 8.
First item on the agenda is the consent agenda. For the consent item, I'll read out the title associated with the recommended motion printed on the agenda. Members of General Committee may ask that an item be held to discuss the matter further. If an item is not held, the motion is deemed to be approved on consent. No further discussion of the item will take place at General Committee, and it will go forward to the next Council meeting for consideration. As there are no public meetings, presentations, deferred business, and reports of Reference Advisory Committee, the only staff report is EMT 001-23, the 2023 Business Plan and Budget, the operating portion. Councillor, do I have somebody to hold that, Councillor?
Hold, please.
Thank you. Held by Councillor Harvey. We'll now proceed directly to the 2023 Business Plan and Budget. Councillor Harvey, would you put the item on the floor?
Yes, Mayor Nuttall, I'll put the item on the floor as printed.
Thank you, Councillor Harvey. Just to bring everybody up to date on what the plan is for this evening, obviously this is one of the biggest pieces of our mandate as council is to approve the budget. Tonight's deliberations will continue into tomorrow night likely and end with our service partners at the beginning of March. What we have on the agenda to deal with is the proposal that's been brought forward by our public service to look at all of the operating costs for the City of Barrie, the requests from our service partners that will look at things like policing, the County of Simcoe, social housing, long-term care shelters, the library, and many other partner services. And we also have a capital budget that we'll need to approve as part of this process. The combination of those service partners and our capital budget and our operating budget will leave us in a position to be able to determine what the effect is on our community in terms of the potential tax increase or fee increases this year. And it will also take into consideration all of the projects that will be taken on going forward. Many of those projects, in terms of our capital plan, have multi-year impacts. To put some perspective on where we're starting, the overall tax increase that's being considered is 3.95%. That is encompassing all of those items together, with the exception of the wastewater, water, and stormwater proposal that's been brought forward. If you include the stormwater proposal, which would be directed towards fixing stormwater infrastructure, retaining ponds and other items as such, we'd be looking at somewhere around a 7.5% to 8% increase this year. That's where we're starting. That's not where we're ending. But before we go into actually debating the budget and going through the budget, I just want to say thank you to all of our public servants who've worked very hard to get us to this place, whose work towards the 2023 business and budget plan has encompassed not one but two councils, and that have really tried to, in their terms, balance what they see as the affordability question for the residents in the city of Barrie, alongside the necessary investments needed in terms of our frontline services, City Hall, as well as any capital projects going forward. I think the work that's being done prior to us even deliberating on this is outlined in the proposed 0.88% tax increase on the what I call the City Hall controlled operating budget. There was a lot of work that was done just to get there. And these are very, very difficult times in the sense that we have the same issues that folks are facing at home in terms of higher interest rates, in terms of inflation, the city of Barrie is facing as well. And we need to be able to, through our conversations tonight, working as a team, make sure that we balance all of these items out. And it's never going to feel perfect, and we're not all going to agree on everything. But I know at the end of the day, we're all coming to the table trying to do what we believe is best for the residents and citizens of the city of Barrie. So with that, we're going to start tonight with Deputy Mayor Thompson. I believe that you have a couple of housekeeping items to deal with.
Thanks, Mayor Nuttall. I have a deferral motion that, considering the Barrie Police Service Board budget, be deferred to General Committee meeting to be scheduled on March 8th, 2023.
We have an amendment on the floor to EMT 001-23 to consider the Barrie Police Service Board budget to be deferred until the General Committee meeting on March 8th, 2023. Are there any? Yes, Councillor Harvey.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor Nuttall. In order to meet my legislative requirements under Section 17, Sub 3 of the Police Services Act, I will not participate in this discussion or vote on this matter.
Madam Clerk, is the potential conflict of interest being noted?
Yes, Mayor Nuttall.
Thank you so much. Are there any other questions or comments regarding the police services budget? Seeing none, all those in favor? It is approved. Deputy Mayor Thompson, your next motion, please.
Thank you, Mayor Nuttall. I have another deferral motion of our partner budget request that consideration of the following budget be deferred to General Committee meeting to be scheduled on March 8th, 2023, Barrie Public Library, County of Simcoe, and the remainder of the Barrie Service Partners.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Thompson. The consideration of the following budgets to be deferred to General Committee meeting on March 8th. That's the Barrie Public Library, the County of Simcoe, and the remainder of the partners, which includes the conservation authorities, etc. Are there any questions or comments from members of committee? Seeing none, all those in favor? It's approved. We're now back to EMT 001-23 as amended. I will go now to Councillor Morales. Councillor Morales.
Thank you, Mayor Nuttall. I'll put the following amendment on the floor. That's regarding councillor expense accounts. And it reads as follows. To add the following to paragraph 1. That effective in 2023, the expense account allocation for items such as communications to residents for the mayor be determined using a base amount of $25,000 plus 10 cents per person using population projections provided through the Development Services Department instead of the current 6 cents per person. And that effective in 2023, the expense account for items such as communications to residents allocations for the members of council be determined using a base amount of $5,000 plus 10 cents per person using population projections provided through the Development Services Department instead of the current 27 cents per person, amounts resulting in an increase to the tax levy in 2023 of $53,245.65.
Thank you, Councillor Morales. The amendment to the budget is on the floor. Are there any questions or comments? Councillor Rittman.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I was just wondering if the mover would consent to splitting the motion. I'm quite in favor of the increasing the expenses for the mayor, because I think that if we're going to do a circulation of some sort, you'd very quickly spend the money that is currently in your budget. But for the individual councillors, I'm not sure that it's necessary. I certainly haven't experienced it in my past that I bumped up against the top of the budget, and I would I think doubling this budget is just is going a little too far. So if we could split the motion, I would appreciate that.
Councillor Miles, before you speak, is it okay if I thank you. So, Councillor Whitman, the concern that I personally had with this was that we had some councillors that were at roughly 3,300 and some that were at 6,700, and the goal was to try to even that out, because it became, I think, unfair to some in how they would actually be able to communicate. If council wants to deal with the numbers on the floor, then let's deal with the numbers on the floor. But I do personally believe that there's a fairness piece for members of council. Councillor Nixon's budget, I think, was in the 3,000 something, and then Councillor Harvey, you were at something around 6,700, and then Councillor Morales was at 6,300, and I personally had a big issue with that, because that makes it really difficult for Councillor Nixon to do his job in comparison. So I'll leave it over to Councillor Morales, but I had personally raised this, and I know Councillor Morales dealt with it after that.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor Nettle. Yeah, the Ward 9 budget, the smallest ward in the city, is almost double downtown, and yours. So if you based on the new information, if you want to split it again, fair enough.
Thank you, through you, Mayor Nuttall, perhaps to the clerk. I'm in support of the motion, because I, too, am one where you did one mail out, and that was almost your budget for communications in a year, and hearing that was important for residents, and they did like that, and usually mail out, unfortunately, though, but it's still, in my opinion, from hearing from residents, the best way to get information out because of the different modes of technology that people use or do not use. I did want to clarify through the clerk, because through COVID, when we went virtual, town halls, I'm continuing to hear that those are high value add ways in which we're communicating, and those are done jointly by the mayor and members of council for multiple wards, and I thought it was a very efficient way. I'm not sure if that's being planned or not. I'm hoping that continues, but again, I don't believe that was billed to me individually as a member through my expense, and so I'm assuming that type of process, should it continue, would either come through the mayor's or be absorbed within our operations, but isn't something we should be considering if we need to ask for that to continue post-COVID.
Through you, Mayor Nuttall, to Councillor Kungle, you're correct. The town halls, they were scheduled and administered through the mayor's office during the previous term. There was no expense incurred through your expense accounts for those town hall meetings, unless you were using your newsletter to communicate them happening, but otherwise there was no other expense incurred.
So if I may assume through that, I'm not hearing that should be something we're appreciating as an addition to then have to use within this increased money, that all things considered, I would have a full $5,000 as, for an example, allocation to be using for direct communications outside of town halls. It might be joint communication forums with the mayor.
Through you, Mayor Nuttall, to Councillor Kungle, yes. And we can work with the mayor's office on getting some assistance in scheduling the town hall meetings throughout the term.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Kungle. And we had the opportunity this week to work on some questions, to get some collaboration with the public on feedback on different items, and that, I think, falls in the same sort of neighborhood. I think when the mayor's doing things in the community, it's going to fall into the sub-communities, the wards, and we need to make sure that those things are done together. I'd love to do a telephone town hall or a Facebook town hall or something like that. I think they have great value. So, Councillor Morales.
Thank you, Mayor. Not to delay this one, we have a lot, but one comment from Councillor Rema's questions. If a member of council has a budget that works for them, there's nothing here that says they have to spend it. Also, I don't believe there's any currently, and I'm not proposing any changes, there's no provision that the money rolls over. So if you don't want to spend it and you don't see the need to, that we budget for that, but that goes back to city coffers and that never got spent. So if somebody's maybe on the fence and considering that, it works for me right now, I don't need to see an increase, then there's some flexibility there.
That's great. Thank you. Are there any other questions or comments on the amendment on the floor? Seeing none, all those in favor? It is approved. Councillor Harvey, you are next. Just before we do, I just want to say thank you, because I know that you've put an awful lot of time and effort into this. And so I know you've got quite a bit that you've been working through with both the team around the table and also our team of public servants. So I'll hand it over to you, and we'll glide through the evening.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor Nuttall, and again, thank you to you, Deputy Mayor Thompson, and everybody around the table, because yes, this budget, obviously, because we're dealing with a larger incremental increase right off the hop, there was a lot more work that's gone into this budget in comparison to the previous 4 budgets that I dealt with in the previous term. And I think we're in a position where obviously we have to make some very difficult decisions, and some of the decisions are decisions that we probably don't want to have to make, but we're in that situation. So my first amendment is that paragraph 3 be amended as follows to add the following. That the following new investment and service recommendations be accepted as tax levy supported increases. Intake form 2686, utility SCADA specialist. Intake form 2737, roads operations staff, growth lands 2023. Intake form 2707, emergency vehicle technician. Intake form 2717, facilities project managers. Intake form 2720, waterfront additional cleaning. Intake form 2719, marina boat storage. Intake form 2726, Barrie Transit fare increase. Intake form 2759, Barrie Transit service reduction, Salem and Hewitts, resulting in a reduction in the net cost from $2.7 million on operating to $329,358, and a reduction to the tax levy of $1,432,180.
Thank you, Councillor Harvey. Are there any questions and comments with regards to the latest motion? Amendment on the floor. Councillor Kungl.
Are you, well, I guess for process, we're not looking at pulling apart anything that we'd like as an exception, as an amendment to an amendment. So do you want us to be voting on this in whole or in part? Because there's some that I would say that I would not like to see removed from the budget that fall outside of the amendments that we've got.
So I think bring them forward as needed. I was alerted that Councillor Negussi has one that he wants to amend. If there's other ones that we don't have here, then they probably should go at this time, just so they're all in the same neighborhood, if you will.
So I guess the one that I would like maybe some discussion on, that I thought had an interesting proposal, was the marina boat storage, and I believe that was maximizing the vacant lot at Vespra, if I'm correct, Councillor Harvey. That was number 2719. And I didn't know if you could help me with the rationale for looking at changing the funding from this.
So Councillor Kungl, 2719 marina boat storage, is that what you're referring to?
It is.
Okay, so that's inside of Councillor Harvey's amendment to maintain within side of the proposed budget?
And so all others so can you just give me more context around what you're including and excluding in this?
So that the following new investment and service recommendations, so those are the ones that were, I can't remember what page it was in the operating plan, be accepted as tax levy supported increases. It's 2686, 2737, 2707, 2717, 2720, 2719, 2726, and 2759. These are only the tax levy supported ones that he's referring to. Anything that's not tax levy supported, that was reserve supported or otherwise, I don't believe is encompassed in this.
Okay, thank you for that clarification. Yeah.
Are there any other, Councillor Rittman?
Just on that subject, it seems to me that Councillor Kungl does have a proposed amendment to 2726, and that is to exempt the seniors from that. So I'm just wondering whether we should deal with that now or do it later.
I can take that now in order? Okay. So I'd like to actually remove 2726 from the proposed amendment, and I can speak to that if you like. But specifically, I'm looking at should the transit fare increase pass, then I was looking to table an amendment. So if this gets voted down, then I will actually add my amendment.
Yeah, why don't we deal with it in that order, because I think it's cleaner with the prep that's been done on it.
Yeah, thanks, Claire.
And that makes sense.
Yeah.
And then we're not trying to wordsmith on the go. And I know that I'll get confused, and that means we'll all be confused too. Councillor Negussi.
Thank you, Mayor Nadal. I have amendment to the amendment that the following new service investment and recommendation be approved. Intake form 2744, summer weekend reopening, resulting in an increase to the net cost in bracket operating of 106,634, and the increase to the tax levy of 106,634.
Thank you, Councillor Negussi. You have put on an amendment to the amendment, which is to include the summer weekend reopening of our facilities, our rec facilities. This would then, if approved, this will fall in line with the rest of them, which maintains them in the recommended service recommendations for the budget. Are there any questions or concerns? Or Councillor Harris and then Councillor Harvey.
Okay, thank you, Mayor Nuttall. Just to say that I'm in favor, and thank you, Councillor Negussi, for catching this. I saw that on the new investments service allocation, and when this was taken off last year, those of us who have rec centers in our wards probably heard a lot. And it felt like a little bit like a penny wise, pound foolish with good intentions, but really it did impact residents, so thank you for catching this, and I definitely will support the amendment. Thank you.
Councillor Harvey.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor Nuttall. Actually, I'm basically echoing what Councillor Harris just said. I know last summer, even those of us that don't have the community centers in our area, which I do in my ward, people that do use them were obviously annoyed that they weren't able to use them during the weekend. So I think this is a very well spent $106,000 to be able to reopen our community centers through the summer months. So thank you, Councillor Negussi. And I know we had a discussion earlier today about this, so I'm glad that you brought this forward.
Any other questions or comments? Well, Councillor Negussi, thank you for the amendment. I am in the shape right now to be able to hang out at the skate park, not the rec center, so I don't see that being reopened. I'm just kidding. But thank you. So we'll take a vote on this. Are there, with no other questions or concerns, those in favor? It's approved. We are now on the main amendment to the budget, which is with regards to the new investment and service recommendations. The items are now the 2744, which just got approved to be added in, 2686, 2737, 2707, 2717, 2720, 2719, 2726, and 2729. 2759. Are there any other items or concerns or questions before we vote on this amendment? Deputy Mayor Thompson.
Thank you, Mayor Nuttall. I have an amendment to Councillor Gary Harvey's amendment as amended by Councillor Negussi, that the following new service investments and recommendations be approved: 2758 and 2687. They were just a little bit of an oversight, and as we were trying to maintain a certain budget and supported by not affecting the tax levy, these are very important to have added in, as Next Generation 911 has been something that we're actually a little bit behind, but we're getting there, and so that's that. And the engineering contract administrator, they are very minimal to the tax levy, but extremely important to the corporation. And there's a third one, that intake form 2798 be modified and approved as followed: 3 temporary 1-year contract positions: senior planner, transportation planner, engineer, and risk management inspector, totaling 288 funded from the reinvestment reserve, 174,939 water rate, and 9278 from the capital recovery, with no effect to the. And this is pertaining to Bill 109. As there is very strict timelines, and this is an investment to mitigate the possibility of returning up to $1 million in planning fees. So giving staff the resources, and as they're only part-time, to see where Bill 109 would land, and that possibly that they're not needed for going forward after this year.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Thompson. So just so I can perhaps just rephrase that, so there's 2758, 2687, that's the technology and the engineering contract administrator, and then 2798 are the Bill 109 planners, correct?
Yes, Mayor. No, in the intake form, it was for 6, and we've
Modified it.
Modified it.
Great. Are there any questions or comments on those 3 items? Councillor Morales.
Thank you, Mayor Nuttall. 2798, they're full-time, they're just temporary, right? Okay, not part-time. Yeah, I just want to clarify if people are watching, like, you're going to have part-time to address Bill 109, but just wanted to confirm. Thank you.
Any other questions or comments? Thank you, Deputy Mayor Thompson and Councillor Morales. We'll now go to the vote. All those in favor? It's approved. I'm now going to take a vote on the main motion, the amendment to the main motion with regards to what was originally placed on the floor by Councillor Harvey. Councillor Harvey.
Yeah, sorry, Mayor Nuttall. I have 2 more amendments
Okay.
that are actually related to that vote. So I don't know if we want to do these 2 other amendments before we take the vote on that whole totality. It's to do with the intake forms continuing.
Okay, yeah, absolutely. Sorry about that, Councillor Harvey. I need to learn to flip the page, I think.
Thank you, Mayor Nuttall. So the first one is that the following new investment and service recommendations be approved. Intake form 2768, McLaren Art Service Provider status, removed from Cultural Grants Program, and intake form 2764, Barrie Air Show, resulting in an increase to the net operating of $125,000.
Thank you, Councillor Harvey, and thanks for keeping us on track. The amendment on the floor is for 2768, the McLaren Art Service Provider status, and 2764, the Barrie Air Show, to be approved. Are there any questions or concerns with regards to either of those items? Seeing none, then we'll call the vote. All those in favor? It is approved. Councillor Harvey.
Thank you, Mayor Lennell. And my last amendment in relating to the intake forms is that the new investment and services recommendations not approved through the 2023 budget process be referred back to EMT for reconsideration as a part of the 2024 business plan.
Thank you, Councillor Harvey. Councillor Kungl?
Thank you, Mayor Nuttall. So just for clarification for those viewing this evening and in that framing, so my understanding is, based on that, anything that came through the intake form that was not tied to the tax levy but is funded through other reserve stands. For instance, structural engineer and the infrastructure and growth management office services assistant, those are two examples of new requests, but that money has been identified as coming out of a different surplus reserve. So I'm assuming all else stands, and perhaps if it's helpful for the public, maybe there's an awareness of what was in the budget that actually doesn't carry forward through this motion that's on the table now. Yes. After the fact.
Thank you, Rebecca. Sorry, everyone. As I was saying, instead of going to Councillor Harvey with that question, the items that are not included, Madam Clerk, could we just identify those? They're the tax levy supported items that haven't been included in the amendments.
Mayor Nuttall, I'm going to defer to the treasurer.
Yeah.
Greg?
Through you, Mayor Nuttall, if we could get clarification, just that we call out all the intake forms you are approving, just so it's perfectly clear. There's still a bit of confusion as to what's doing. So we have approved the ones that you've listed, but if we could just do a motion to approve, to call out all of the ones that we are approving, just so it's perfectly clear, if that's okay.
The tax levy supported items that are approved are 2686, 2737, 2707, 2717, 2720, 2719, 2726, 2759, 2744, 2798 as amended, 2758, 2687, 2768, 2764 so far.
And if we could just do a motion to call out the other ones that you're also approving that aren't tax levy, just so that's perfectly clear.
So those are all the tax levy ones?
Yeah, so are those all the intake forms that you are approving as council?
That are tax levy supported?
Yes.
All
and
of
if
the
there
reserve.
are other ones that are not tax supported, if you're approving them, could we just list those as well, just so it's...
So those are, just one moment there, Mr. Mills.
So Robert, do you want to go through this?
Okay.
The amendment to the amendment to the amendment.
I want to amend that.
Please trust us with your budget. We are well organized. Deputy Mayor Thompson, so in speaking with staff, as we just did, the question has been asked of the items that have been approved but haven't been outlined so far that were either reserve or capital recovery or other types of funding. So if you could read those numbers out for me with the approval given to him.
Thank you, Mayor Nuttall. An amendment to the amendment of the amendment to the amendment that intake form 2723, a structural engineer, be approved. And this is just fully supported, not part of the tax levy. And the other one is 2799. That is the only remaining intake forms. Oh, sorry. Economic development and tourists. That's the tourist resource.
CEO Prowse, could you perhaps enlighten us on the approach to take on this, as you're going to be the one who's going to be interpreting all of these things along with our clerk and our senior team, and I want to make sure that we have this crystal clear.
Thank you, Mayor Nuttall. Through to you, to members of General Committee, I think I'll try to capture it, and I may need some assistance here, but Deputy Mayor Thompson, just starting at the top of the new investment forms, using the rationale that I think was spelled out, funding for positions that was coming from other than tax levy. I see 2722 as the first one, but I didn't hear you call that out. Is that part of it?
I thought, yes, you're right.
Could
Sorry.
be me. My apologies. Nope. I also see 2723, which I see you did call out, which is funded from the same enterprise model. 2799 is an economic development and tourism resourcing, funded, I believe, fully from MAT, but is a reserve-funded position. And I think if anybody on my team sees one that I'm missing, if you could let me know. I think that covers the 2762, Mr. Gillespie? 63. Oh, yeah. I think that's a call for council, but that is a split funding, tax levy and capital recovery. I'm not sure if it's council's desire to move that forward.
Thank you, CEO Proust. That is all. Madam Clerk, would you like a vote on the those items to be recorded to ensure that they are actually included in the budget?
Yes, please, Mayor Nuttall.
Okay. So the item has been put on the floor by Deputy Mayor Thompson to include the non-tax levy supported positions. I think we're clear as mud on that. Is there any other questions or concerns before we proceed with those? We'll start with Councillor Harvey, and then we'll go over to Councillor Morales.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor Nuttall. I have another amendment to the amendment now that this has kind of played out a little bit differently than what I originally had thought it was going to, and that would be to remove intake 2799, economic development and tourism resourcing position, until such time as the sports tourism master plan is presented to council for further consideration later in 2023.
Thank you, Councillor Harvey. Councillor Kungl.
Thank you, Mayor Nuttall. In the past, we have considered that sometimes when there is a full-time FTE salary position, as that one is set before us, Councillor Harvey, we've talked a bit about forecasting when there would be a hiring in the quarter. So I'd like to check with staff, although I'm hearing a deferral of committing to it until we know more in year. Should we be approving pending ability to move forward a quarter or half of that salary position if there's still the intention to see it funded somewhat in 2023?
CEO Prowse, I think the question from Councillor Kungl is if it's anticipated to be hired after there's a plan put forth, is it recommended to maintain it within the budget?
In full or in part, thank you. Just so we don't lose the whole salary in 2023, should it be reduced, would it at least be to maintain a quarter of that salary so it can move forward if it is supported?
Through you, Mayor Nuttall, to Councillor Kungl, and subject to correction from my finance team, I believe because that position is funded fully from the reserve, council, should they choose not to move forward that position today, could move forward with that position mid-year, since you're drawing the funding from that MAT reserve, assuming that that funding is in place.
Thank you. So I've got no concerns then if that's fully funded through the MAT tax and that is available in the year.
Councillor Harvey?
Great. Thank you, Mayor Nuttall. Yeah, just a little bit of rationale on this. My understanding is part of this sport tourism plan is also going to outline roles and responsibilities when it comes to tourism Barrie, along with the city itself. And that's why I say it's just best that we pause for a few months until we have that plan presented to us. And at that time, we can then make the decision moving forward, opposed to using MAP money immediately and making a different decision after the plan is presented to us.
Thank you, Councillor Harvey. Councillor Morales?
Thank you, Mayor Nuttall. I was just going to question why we were adding the position, so Councillor Harvey's amendment essentially achieves what I had intended.
Thank you, Councillor Morales. Are there any other questions or concerns from members of council? Seeing Councillor Congo.
Thank you. One last question. As we were finalizing the reference to what fell in and out of being funded through reserves versus the tax levy, there was one position that was identified as 2763, the system analyst, that was coming about partial from capital, I think, and then partial from a tax levy. I'm seeing 38,000 from the tax levy, 80,000 from the recovery from capital. I just wanted to give a moment to staff if they wanted to comment about this position. Should we consider it amongst the others because it is touching part of the reserves?
Through you, Mayor Nuttall, I'm going to ask Ryan Nolan to comment on the position as it's in his department.
Thank you. Through Mayor Nuttall. The position is in place to support all of the new things we've done for citizens on our website and through our different portals to access various services. Through COVID, we obviously accelerated many of those items, and we never really looked at a long-term sustainability plan because we didn't have time to. We just said we need to do this, go, and we're at the time where we need some extra resources in order to support all the things we brought forward, as well as continue to advance what we had in the longer-term roadmap anyway, to continue to add more services to our portals, as well as making things available pretty much 24/7 for citizens as much as we can, and businesses.
If I may follow up, because I appreciate that, but I do see that 2023 is very different about where the dollars then pull year over year, and it moves into a full tax levy position by 2025. So I know that these are intended to be, I believe, full-time permanent. I'm not sure if there's a will of council for at least to support workflow and activity, should it be a temporary position with 75% or so of the salary coming out of capital, not tax reserve, at least for this year. If it would be temporary versus permanent, would it still be a value add, Mr. Nolan, around us considering that with a lower percentage of that salary coming from the tax capital? Would you like to see it continue 1 year?
Through you, Mayor Nuttall. Yeah, any resource will be welcomed. We'll be able to, if it's for the 2 years as mentioned in here, then that's 2 years we can continue to move things forward and potentially come back to council at that point for either conversion or whatever those needs might be in the 2 years. So, temporary terms are a little harder to recruit in this market than permanent positions, but we can certainly try, and I wouldn't say no to it.
Councillor, can I just want to qualify something? So one of the pieces of the question there, Mr. Miller, that was asked with regards to 2763 was relation to the funding, which right now under the capital recovery is about 80,919, and then perhaps a reduction on the tax levy. My understanding is when we're moving some of these dollars around, we have to allocate based on where we're actually getting the dollars from, and you could perhaps see a reduction based on the percentages going down, but maybe not just say no to the tax levy and yes to the capital recovery. Is that correct?
Through you, Mayor Nuttall, to members of General Committee. So when it says capital recovery, that actually means there's a capital project related to the work. So this position, I guess, in year one, we'll be doing some work related to a specific capital project where the time will get charged to. Not all the time is they're not 100% working on projects. There is an operational maintenance piece of it. So it's related to a specific amount of work through capital. So it is an operating. Generally, you fund positions through your operating budget. You need a base operating piece of it. There are some positions that are capital in nature. For example, in Bala's group, they're building bridges. There's some of them, almost all their time is into capital. And that's driven really by how PSAP defines capital. You can capitalize their costs in the accounting world. So to answer your questions, this one here is partially going to be an operational piece, and it's also doing a lot of capital work initially. It's how it's being funded, if that makes sense.
It does. So I don't think we can eliminate the one side and keep the other. I just wanted to
No, thank you. I was looking to clarify with that context overall, because our motion we've approved to date, pending the vote, is that if it draws from the reserves, we're supporting it. So it's a good point of clarification to identify. This isn't a reserve, this is a capital. So it would have fallen out and is not approved at this time, even though funds for the salary are coming out of two different sources. So on that, considering it's not fully coming out of the tax levy and the pressures tied to APLI, permitting, licensing, and the pressure points that we're coming into where we want to be promoting development and efficiencies, I'll look to the will of council. I'd like to table an amendment that we actually add back in for 2023-2024, commitment to the system analyst position. And I guess I'll look to staff to deem that to be a temporary position.
Thank you, Councillor Kungl. So the amendment to the amendment is that 2763 be funded inside of the 2023 operating budget based on the capital recovery of 80,919, the capital budget of 1,938,854 from the tax levy, and that it be considered a temporary position. Maybe 1 year contract, is that what you're?
I was proposing 2 years just for some continuity, although it does shift, but I'll put that on the floor for a 2-year temporary full-time position.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Kungl. Are there any questions, Councillor Harvey?
Yeah, thank you, Mayor Nuttall. Question to staff, probably Mr. Nolan would be the best. Just looking at the roles and responsibilities of this particular position, it speaks to APLI, which is a web application that we've already got up and running. I don't know if there's new pieces to it that would be launched as a result of it. And then it speaks to citizen experience management, which I'll be straight up. I have no idea what that actually is speaking to. And then also turning some further services for the community onto online, so that way it's accessible 24/7. I'm just wondering if you could speak to the roles, responsibilities, and any potential impacts if we don't pass this amendment.
Sure, through you, Mayor Nuttall. From the APLI side, we are continuing to expand that project. However, there is capital funding that is funding those resources. What we have out already that require some maintenance and continuous improvements, obviously some of the development bills going around and making changes, modify some of the forms and fields and submissions that we need to do. Generally not massive amounts of work, but enough drops fill a bucket. For CEM, that is our citizen portal. So where Service Barrie directs a lot of staff or a lot of citizens to, where if they want to fill out forms, potholes, graffiti, garbage in parks, all those things that a citizen could just go to and do either from their phone or from a computer or wherever they want, whenever they want. It's to continue working on those, and there is a longer plan of more things to add into that, as well as deepen those integrations into our back systems so that it's not just a form up front for a citizen to put something in, but that actually ties into our back-end systems that actually drive work. Our potholes is a good example. That's a high-frequency thing. When a citizen puts in something through the portal on a pothole, that actually goes right into operations work queue in CityWorks, one of our internal systems, so that the next morning the foreman or the lead in that crew already sees that it's already built. Plus we have when they finish that work and close it out, there is a feedback loop back to Service Barrie that's actually closed. So it's tying all those bits and pieces and really narrowing that gap from a citizen request to the actual people doing the work within the city, and trying to shorten those times and keep improving how quickly we can deliver services.
Great, thank you. And just a follow-up, if I could, Mayor Nuttall. Just when it comes to the recovery from the capital piece, obviously, year one, it looks like it's just over $80,000. Year two, it's just over 35. And then once you get into year 3 and 4, it's zero. Is that just because you're not able to project what that individual would be doing from a capital side of things as we get further down the road? Or I'm just trying to get to some justification here as to, because we're seeing a shift from the tax levy being a small part of it in year one. However, the tax levy is shifted to being the larger part of it come year 2.
Through you, Mayor Nuttall. The funding for IT 1025 is our external website, so that is the capital piece of it. That is a fixed length capital project, kind of one-time cost of getting up a lot of our external website. The website, obviously, but they wouldn't work as much on that, but the citizen portal, Apply, and a few other things that we have on the go. As that funding runs out and that project comes to close, that's where, excuse me, that's where that tail off of the capital recovery comes in and a flip into sustainment mode. So it won't be necessarily building as much brand new stuff as we will be initially with the capital funding, and it'll be sustaining things that have already been built and making modifications and optimizations to the growing portfolio of digital offerings that we'll have are going to need that support of, hey, we need to add a new rec center into these fields, or we need to add new rec schedules, or we need to add new parks as new parks come along, or new roads as new roads start developing potholes. So all of those things take a little bit of work, and the point of kind of tapering off the capital piece of this was both it aligns with the funding and the timing of the project of bringing on new services and abilities in our digital capabilities, and as well as moving to, we will need resources to support this, which would be more falling aligned to my understanding of the accounting. That would be more aligned with an operating cost as opposed to trying to come up with a different capital to continue funding these. It would be operational costs to maintain existing capabilities.
Great, thank you. And just one last follow-up. If council didn't approve this, I assume the user experience that our residents have wouldn't actually be impacted, is kind of what I'm reading between the lines here. Am I correct in that assumption?
Through you, Mayor Nuttall, our existing things would not, they wouldn't stop working. We do have staff that would keep those going. It would essentially halt any new things going forward. Apply being the one exception, there is some funding in a different capital program that would keep some of the Apply things moving forward. But as far as the citizen portal and continuing to have enhancements along there, enhancements and tying more things into the mobile app, those things would be delayed. We have other projects on the go too, so we would have to shuffle resources around, and we wouldn't necessarily be able to focus on these as quickly as we want to get those services up and available.
Great, thank you. I'm having difficulty in supporting this because it does have an impact on the tax levy. Unfortunately, this is a budget where we've had to penny pinch and really go through this line by line, so I have some difficulty, especially when it's not going to have any impact on what the services that we're already offering when it comes to the online piece, and it seems like there's already staff able to deal with the back-end issues when those arise. So maybe it's something that we should be reassessing in 2024. So I won't support this amendment.
Thank you, Councillor Harvey. Are there any other questions or comments around the table? Seeing none, I'll call to question the amendment to the amendment put on by Councillor Kungl to bring 2763 back into the budget. Support of the amendment brings the position back in and would then be added to the other ones that we've already brought back in as well. Those in favor on my right and on my left. Okay, the amendment fails. We'll now go back to the main amendment. Deputy Mayor Thompson.
Thanks, Mayor Nuttall. It was a little bit of an oversight, and I apologize, but I'd like to add intake form 2734, which it's at the very bottom. It's the disability management specialist, and I can speak to that.
Yes.
So there is no cost associated. It's actually being performed in a position today. It just needs, through the HR department, they're already working on it. It just needs council approval to continue that staff member having that role as a full-time person. But there's no cost.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Thompson. The amendment to the amendment is 2734, disability management specialists be included in the accepted new investment and service recommendation requests. Are there any questions or comments? Councillor Harvey?
I apologize, Mayor Nuttall. I seem to have a lot of questions tonight, but I just want a little bit of clarity. So I can see here from the intake form, the last 2 years it's been, it appears that it's been serviced through the CAO's office, and the reason there's an offset here is in relation to consultants. So does that mean that the funding that's been carried over the last couple of years is going to be stopped, and we would then contract this out? Am I reading that correctly?
Through you, Mayor Nuttall, to Councillor Harvey, I'll ask Ms. Janino to speak to it, as it's under the CAO's office. Her office reports in through the CAO's office. My understanding is, yes, the consulting dollars would be repurposed to the staff member. Christine?
Yep, thank you, CAO Prost. Through you, Mayor Nuttall, to Councillor Harvey. It is currently consulting dollars in the HR budget that is being used to staff our disability management specialist in-house. So rather than have that be spent on consultants, which are much more expensive, we would just put that money into the permanent staffing for that position. There would be no additional impact to the tax levy.
Great, thank you.
Are there any other questions or comments? Seeing none, we'll call the vote. All those in favor? It's approved. Are there any other? Councilor Morales.
Could I make a quick point? Could we vote on what we have right now, get it out of the way? Yeah. So I agree with Councilor Harvey on this. I thought we were going to do his grid and then start adding and taking away, but now we're doing amendments on amendments on amendments, plus staff that things that aren't on the tax, and it's getting away from us.
Okay, that's a great point. Thank you, Councilor Morales. We will proceed to that at this point. Okay, members of council, so where we're at right now is as amended, the amendment as amended. I think I'm missing one of the amendments when I say that. Was Councillor Harvey's remaining intake forms piece. We've then made amendments to that, which we voted on. So I'm now going to take a vote on that piece, and then we will go back to the main portion, which was originally introduced and has been amended 4 or 5 times at this point. Okay, so on Councillor Harvey's amendment as amended. Any questions or comments? Seeing none, all those in favor? It's approved. We're now back on to the initial amendment as amended multiple times. Are there any other questions or comments with regards to Councillor Kungl?
So now I think that we've dealt with the overall piece. I would like to address that we've approved the increase to transit fares for the 2023 tax levy. Or you still want to proceed through before any
So we haven't actually approved that yet. We've approved the final amendment to that amendment.
Okay.
So
wait for one more amendment?
Yes, one more amendment, Councillor Kungl. I know I said that about 20 minutes ago. Are there any other questions or comments? Seeing none, we'll take a vote on the main amendment that was brought forward by Councillor Harvey. All those in favor? Approved. Councillor Kungl, I think you have something for us.
All right. Can you tell I'm eager about this one? So as we've just approved that the transit fees are increasing in 2026, I would like to table the following amendment as an exception to the fares as follows. that the transit fare increase provided for intake form 2726 not apply to seniors, and I can speak to that. And further, part 2, that the reduction of $24,209 in revenue be replaced through a one-time draw on the reinvestment reserve, and I can speak to that as well.
Thank you, Councillor Congle. The floor is yours.
Thank you. In some of the intake forms, there was information that did identify what data was attributed to increasing seniors in fares and by type of fare, be it a 10 pass, a day pass, or cash. So this motion, for clarity, is to totally exclude any type of increase to seniors on any fare type in 2023. Further, that there was an association to $24,000 and change being attributed to what the revenue would have generated from seniors through that fare increase. So if council would like to remain whole and replacing that amount of money, then it would be a one-time draw from the reserve to make up for the loss.
Thank you, Councillor Congle. Your amendment is on your floor. Your statement's been heard. Councillor Morales.
Thank you, Mayor Nuttall. Just to clarify, it's the second one on our papers that was moved, not the first one? Okay. So
that's correct, Councillor Morales.
Okay, perfect. At the current moment, I'm having a tough time supporting it, and here's why. The people who use the bus users, transit users, it's harder to break them down from seniors to non-seniors. If you're using the bus, a lot of people are relying it as their main form of transportation. It's not because they want to, even though some people do want to use public transportation. So I'm having a time answering a hypothetical single mother who is working class, essentially, telling her you're going to get an increase, but not a senior. In my mind, we either do it across the board or not. For other things, I would have an easier time with senior discounts if it's health related, if it's fitness, if it's different mobility, different items. But on this one, I think we should either do it holistically or not. And then making that comment, I'm going to ask Mr. Forsyth a question. Mr. Forsyth, I know you and I had this discussion a couple months ago, so I just want to make sure I get my facts straight. We in Barrie currently don't have a universal transfer for bus riders. Is that correct?
Through you, Mayor Nuttall, to Councillor Morales. Sorry, I didn't hear that last question, that last part of the question.
We currently do not have a universal transfer for bus riders in Barrie. Is that correct?
Through Mayor Nuttall to Councillor Morales. When you say universal transfer, do you mean they can't transfer from one route to the next without paying a second fare?
Thank you for the clarification. It's basically the logic where if somebody's using the bus to go to No Frills, and they're in there between an undetermined period of time, usually between 25 minutes to 40, that they can usually just ride back home.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yes. Okay, I understand the question. Sorry. Yeah. So, Barrie Transit does offer a universal transfer for all riders, and it is time based. And a couple years ago, we increased it from 60 minutes to 75 minutes. And the intention of that was on Sunday. One of the biggest concerns we had is our Sunday service runs an hourly service. And so if an individual is transferring from one bus to the next and they have to wait a long period of time, sometimes that transfer does expire. And so as part of our fare strategy in 2019, Council did approve the increase of that. So it allows an individual to board one bus and another within 75 minutes of their initial ride. So I think what I'm getting at here is I think what you're saying is that there could be an opportunity for somebody to take the bus to the grocery store with their universal transfer to get back on and go home with paying just one fare.
Perfect. Follow up. And that 75 minutes starts the moment you get on the bus the first time.
Correct. The
Not
75.
offload.
Correct. As the passenger boards the bus, they can ask for a transfer from the operator who gets it as they board the bus. Correct.
Okay, perfect. Mayor Nuttall, what I'm getting at with it, because it is kind of related, is, again, I have a tough time slicing and dicing essentially what is seniors versus working class. However, if we were to extend that time to 90 minutes and allow greater freedom for people who maybe that is saving some money, I would, across the board, I could be open to that, but I'll let discussion carry on before doing any amendments.
Thank you, Councillor Morales. Councillor Congle, and then we'll go to Councillor Corser and then Deputy Mayor Thompson.
If helpful, I'll provide some broader context into why I think seniors, at least for me at this time is one where I think there should be an exception. In the intake form, we weren't forecasting to identify an increase in any fares this year. If not, it was 2024, but because of the economic state, it is being bumped up a year. Having been on the Seniors Advisory Committee for the past term and involved in the age-friendly community plan, transportation was one of the key contingencies around an accessible city, connected city, that was important. From there, we actually created a Thursdays is a free transit day for seniors. So we do have very specific supports within that subpopulation group being seniors, where we have made significant considerations to reduce transportation costs because of the impact. I do see it as important to provide something in light of this being not a forecasted one, and ideally giving at least the following year an opportunity for our Seniors and Accessibility Advisory Committee to have conversations on this piece to say, if it comes back in 2024 on fare increases again, would we rather see another free day? Would we rather advise council about an appropriate fare? And what is something that has an impact, so we're not speaking from kind of what is cost effective and what's a barrier. So $24,000 I think is minor. Coming from a reserve is something I think we can afford, and then move it to the Seniors Advisory and Accessibility Committee to actually come back with a recommendation next year in 2024.
Thank you, Councillor Kungl and Councillor Corser.
Yes, through you, Mayor Nuttall. I would be supportive, actually, of universally holding that, because unfortunately, financially vulnerable people are most likely to use our public transit. And I don't think that a lot of people in this time are able to afford too much more stresses on what they have to spend now. So I think that I would be supportive of a universal freeze for the time being.
Thank you, Councillor Corser. Deputy Mayor Thompson.
Thanks, Mayor Nuttall. Councillor Morales brought up a point. Maybe to staff, how do we identify, does the driver ask seniors, are you a senior, when they pay their fares? And the reason being is, sometimes you got to watch that you're not putting our providers in that issue, where the drivers don't want to have that confrontation with somebody. If they get on and they look as young as me and say, I'm a senior, then, I just want to make sure that it doesn't put our providers in that, and if there was a way that we could, eliminate the confrontation between the driver and the user of the service.
Thank you, through you, Mayor Nuttall. Certainly, we at all costs try to avoid any kind of conflict between the driver and the rider, and so there wouldn't be a situation where we'd get into a fight over that. On Barrie Transit, the policy for being a senior is 65 and older. But if someone argues it, the driver would have the flexibility to reduce the fare on a case-by-case basis.
Another question, and to Councillor Corser's, that fare hikes right now for a lot of people. Are you aware, and do we work with the county on some support for seniors or for people in lower income who are relying on transit?
Thank you for the question. We, as a matter of fact, we did have a conversation with the County of Simcoe today with respect to that matter. And there are no programs being offered through the county at this time for seniors for riding or subsidizing our transit service. There are programs available to take a senior to outside of our community for medical purposes, and that is funded, but not to subsidize our transit system. However, they do offer through Ontario Works an employment assistance program. So if you are on Ontario Works and you need a bus pass to get to employment purposes, that is subsidized through the Ontario Works program through the County of Simcoe.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Councillor Harvey.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor Nuttall. I will support this, and I do appreciate the amendment coming forward. I have recently been reached out by a couple of seniors in my own ward in relation to some of the struggles that they're having, and I anticipate that I'll be bringing something else forward down the road. But when you look at Stats Canada, the most recent data available is from 2020, and the median salary for those that are 65 plus is only $32,200. So these are people that are extremely at the low end of the bracket when it comes to income, especially those that are on a single income if they happen to be a widow now. And obviously they're on a fixed income because of being on pension, whether it's Canada Pension or if they happen to be lucky enough to have a company pension. But it is an issue. It's a small amount, and for the sake of $24,000 and change coming out of a reserve, I think it's the right thing to do.
Thank you, Councillor Harvey. Seeing no others, I have one issue, and it's not with the actual amendment itself and the intent, but more that I want to alert Council, this is a deferral, it's not a funding. So the approval of this amendment does not result in maintaining seniors, the current seniors' fares going forward. It defers it to next year. And I say that because I don't want to set up my colleagues to where we're having the same debate, same time, same bat channel, and really going in a circle. So the reason that I'm going to support it as is because I know that there's a conversation that is wanted to be had around this as members of council. I think we need to have that fulsome conversation, but we need to remember when we're having it in a few months that we deal with the budget this time of year, and every decision we make in between affects this night. And so I don't want to be having the exact same conversation next year because I think that that's just not fair to seniors, it's not fair to our public service who put all the work in, and quite frankly, it's not fair to ourselves. Okay? So I'm going to support it, but I just leave that caution out for everybody. All those, are there any other questions or concerns? Okay, all those in favor? It is approved. Give me one quick second, folks. I'm just going to get caught up with the items. Deputy Mayor Thompson, you wanted to ask a question?
Thanks, Mayor Nuttall. Just because of all the amendments and motions, I've been trying to keep on top of everything. And this is to Mr. Miller. Do I have as at a reduction of 1.205321?
It's a very specific number you have, Deputy Mayor Thompson.
It's 43 cents.
And 43 cents. Mr. Miller.
Sorry, through you, Mayor Nuttall. Could I ask Deputy Mayor Thompson just to repeat his number?
$1,205,321.43.
That's exactly what I have, so we're good.
You're either both right or both wrong. We will now move on to Councillor Harris. I believe you have an amendment. Councillor
Point of order.
Harris?
Councillor Kungal's other transit fee amendment, was that, is she intending to put there, or was that just hedging the bets? Okay.
Councillor Harris?
Thank you, Mayor Nuttall. I'll put the following amendment on the floor, and it reads, that intake form 2768, McLaren Arts Center, service provider status removed from cultural grants program be amended to provide $165,000 funding commitment to the McLaren Arts Center funding by removing $125,500 from the Arts and Culture Investment Fund and the remaining $40,000 funded from the Reinvestment Reserve. I can speak to that if you need.
Go ahead, Councillor Harris.
So thank you, Mayor Nuttall. I think most members of council have kind of seen the rationale and the work that's been put in by the McLaren as it relates to their budget, their funding, and solidifying the operation. So without getting too much detail, certainly be able to answer questions, but hopefully that this change makes sense, and it's a good foundational decision for the arts community. Thank you.
Any other questions or comments? Deputy Mayor Thompson.
Thank you, Mayor Nuttall, and thank you to Councillor Jim Harris and also Councillor Nixon. I know Councillor Harris has been on this board for 4 years, and he's watched the transformation of great business decisions, and this is the stuff that you really like to see from some of our boards. They made really tough decisions, and they've done very well. And they looked at some of the services they were providing that were actually losing money. And if you look and follow, their actual budget requests have went down since 2019, I think. And I'm not saying this is rewarding them, but you know, it actually allows them to concentrate on the arts and do what they're supposed to do. And like I said, it's nice to see, you know, volunteer boards really strive to do great in our community. And the question really is, it's, you know, do we want to have a city with an art community or we don't? And I'm going to be in support of this. So thank you.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Thompson. Are there any other questions or comments on the table? Councillor Morales.
Just very quickly, Mayor Nuttall, I'll be supportive of this, and here's why. You know, actions speak louder than words, and I'm seeing action from the McLaren. They came and presented a year ago about their funding. I asked some pretty tough questions that night, and what I see now, amongst many things that they're doing, but one of the things that stands out to me was the Lazy Tulip Cafe opening there. That's what I like to see. I like to see public-private partnerships of sorts that are creative, that fills a space, and I think that the addition of that business there is good for the business, it's good for the space, it's good for the city, it's complementary to the use of the Art Center, and it's further getting them closer to long-term sustainability. So this allows them to focus a little bit more. So I'd like to see more of that, so I'll be supportive of the amendment.
Thank you, Councillor Morales. Are there any other questions or comments on the amendment on the floor by Councillor Harris? Seeing none, all those in favor? It carries. Councillors Hamilton and Kungl. Who's up?
Sure. That paragraph 1 be amended by adding the following section, that $200,000 or $20,000 per ward in one-time funding be dedicated to support ward-specific initiatives, including community engagement and ward wellness projects to be funded from the reinvestment reserve, with the projects being completed and unveiled by December 31st, 2025, and that staff report back to the Finance and Good Governance Committee concerning an intake and approval process, with council approval of a process occurring before 2023 summer recess.
Thank you, Councillor Hamilton, and thank you, Councillor Kungl, for the work you both put into this amendment. Councillor Morales.
Thank you, Mayor Nuttall. I'd just like to propose a quick amendment, switching the paragraph that's $200,000, $20,000 per ward, and switch it to $25,000 per ward, and I can speak to the amendment.
Go ahead and speak to it.
Thank you, Mayor Nuttall. So the amount, my understanding, it's the amount in the previous term per ward was actually $22,500. So this is actually is a small decrease, and just some context for the new members of council. So as you know from your own newsletters, from beginning your roles, costs are going up. And I've interacted with our Parks Department when I try to find projects in my ward, whether it be tree plantings or this or that. And it always surprised me how much not only costs are going up, but you always have to remember the 13% tax. So it's a small amount that does make a big difference. It can mean the difference between you doing one critical mass project versus having to just avoid it and going and getting a couple speed cushions, or if you want to, you can just get more. So this puts it a little bit better. Some more context. I actually spent probably half my community fund in other wards, specifically Ward 2 and 3, and that's just something I was happy to do. I was actually very fortunate because the previous Ward 10 councillor then spent his money in Ward 9. But this is just something that I just want to make sure we can do wholesome projects. And I do like the part, so kudos to Councillor Kungl and Councillor Hamilton, about it going to the Finance and Good Governance Committee in order to ratify the process and how this money is spent. And I think just the final conclusion to my comments are, if a councillor doesn't need to spend that extra amount, they can always choose not to spend it. Or depending on how the rules are ratified, maybe share it with another ward if there's a project on a perimeter. So those are my comments.
We have an amendment on the floor to change the total cost of the fund from $200,000 to $250,000, which would take the ward expense accounts from $20,000 to $25,000 over the course of the 4-year term. I was just wondering, perhaps, Councillor Morales, if you could also add into your amendment just a housekeeping to change it to Finance and Responsible Governance Committee. Is that okay?
Yes.
Wonderful. And that small change there. Are there any questions or comments with relation to Councillor Morales' amendment to the amendment? Councillor Harvey.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor Nuttall. Just a few comments, just so that way people watching understand. Like, I mean, obviously here we're picking away at things, trying to lower things, but here's something that that we're actually going to increase, and it has no impact on the tax levy. This is coming from a reinvestment reserve, which is exactly what this reserve is for. And we've seen the positive impact that, because last term was the first time it was done, and we've seen the positive impact that it had on various wards, because each ward has its own unique items that people would like to see, whether it's radar boards, whether it's more of the permanent speed cushions and things, and that's what this type of thing enables the councillor to be able to do. And I know in my ward anyway, the residents have been very appreciative with the volume of temporary or full-time speed cushions that we've been able to do as a result of this additional funding. So I think this is something that's definitely the way to go, and I will fully support it.
Thank you, Councillor Harvey. Any other questions or comments? Councillor Kungl.
Maybe just to speak to this in addition, so there's clarity, because I know we talked about what we have spent it on in the past, and also why it's really great, especially for new councillors coming in. But in general, we get involved to be able to make a difference where we live, and this was a really great opportunity. And so the historical impetus was kind of beautification dollars and projects to support what we wouldn't otherwise fund, be it some of us used it for a little bit of traffic calming or speeding, but arts and different projects involving schools and different community groups, broad-based. It was quite lovely to see it, and there's a public report about all the different aspects of the changes. So I'm happy that there hopefully is an appetite to consider this, whether it's $25,000 per ward or $20,000 per ward. I'm not going to stand in the way for that, with the context where the public is at least seeing this is something that, again, is coming out of those electoral dividends into a reserve fund and doesn't touch the tax base. But I did want to take a moment to talk about why we purposefully, Councillor Hamilton and I, and through conversations, I think in general, position this going back to Finance and Responsible Governance Committee is, I think, to some of the comments to Councillor Morales and others, is that there were maybe some loose parameters about how and when we could spend some of this money, and some really great collaboration. So we want to make sure that there are clear parameters for the public around how this $25,000 or $20,000 is going to be used per ward, and what it should be intended for, because ideally there are some principles there that should be publicly available.
Thank you, Councillor Kungl. Are there any other comments or questions? Seeing none, I did want to comment on this. I inherited this program inside the mayor's office when I was elected in October and took office in November. And I don't think this is a program that should be run through the mayor's office. I think it's a little bit difficult for either the mayor or the mayor's employees to be managing the requests of members of council and to be then responsible and accountable for them. So I appreciate the work that's been done to make this I think a more streamlined, but accountable approach to having an impact in the places that we live and in the places we represent and the places that we spend so much of our time. So thank you for doing that. In terms of the dollar amount, which is the amendment on the floor, I don't have an issue either way. I think initially we were talking at this number, and then someone else provided a lower number, Councillor Kungl, and I, being the person I am, said, "Oh, I love that lower number," but it's this is not a make or break, and this is an opportunity to invest in the communities that you're from. The one thing I would ask as we send this through to staff and then eventually through committee is that please come up with a cohesive vision for the city that you can then articulate with inside your ward. And I would encourage folks, whether it's a rule or not a rule, I would encourage folks to make sure we get those dollars inside those wards, because that's the expectation we're setting tonight, not previously, tonight, with regards to it being a ward-specific fund. Are there any other questions or comments? None. All those in favor? It's approved. Deputy Mayor Thompson, the problem with taking your glasses off is you can no longer see the words on the sheet of paper.
Point of order, Mayor Nettle. The motion as amended.
Oh, the motion as amended. Thank you, Councillor Morales. On to the motion as amended. Any other questions or comments? Seeing none, all those in favor? It's approved. Thank you, Councillor Harvey, for the little side chat to get us set up here. You have an amendment that you'd like to put on the floor.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor Nuttall. That $1,850,000 related to salaries and wages for the 2022 budget year be funded by increasing salary gapping by $1,387,500 and $462,500 from the tax rate stabilization reserve.
Thank you, Councillor Harvey. And this is the, in terms of members of council, this is the final one on your sheet, and then we'll be circling back to the others later. It's the $1.85 million related to salaries and wages for the 2022 budget year be funded by increasing salary gapping by $1,387,500 and $462,500 from the tax rate stabilization reserve. Councillor Harvey.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor Nuttall. Just for those watching, just so they understand, essentially in last year we were in negotiations with our unionized city staff, and as a result, obviously, a small incremental increase was agreed upon, and as a result, this is the additional incremental funds that were required to continue to pay staff for the agreed upon 2022 contract.
Thank you, Councillor Harvey. Any other questions or comments around the table? Councillor Kungl.
Thank you. Through you, Mayor Nuttall, maybe just through you to staff, if there's any appreciation for impact this could have when we talk a bit about planning.
CEO Prowse.
Through you, Mayor Nuttall, to Councillor Kungl and members of committee, I think it would be disingenuous if I suggested there would be no impact from this type of salary gapping. Salary gapping presented to council in your budget binder, I think, is $1.475 million, $1.5 million. Frankly, I think staff thought that was probably a stretch, but doable. It's difficult to know what is achievable coming out of COVID. Members of council who've been around for some time will know that prior to COVID, salary gapping was typically around $600,000 to $800,000 a year on what we will call a normal year. It's difficult to know what a normal year looks like anymore. And during COVID, we certainly had salary gapping far beyond that. So I would caution members of council that they should expect there could be impacts to service from this. We will do our best to manage them if this is council's direction, and we will report back at the end of the year as to the results. But it is certainly an increase on the salary gapping component.
Are there any other questions or comments? Seeing none, I'd like to comment on this, and I find myself saying that almost every time right now, but $1.85 million of a $2.65 million recommended increase for this year was related to, not to new staffing, but related to a collective agreement that was put together in the previous year that was under budgeted for. And so as a city, when we are looking at our budgets, that miss of, I believe, 1.8% in the projections based on inflation and all of the changing environment has not been accounted for in the previous fiscal year in 2022. It's instead being counted in the 2023 year. And, you know, the reality is that when we're looking at the 2023 budget, this has zero impact in terms of positives, and only has impact in terms of costs to then pay for previous year's misses. And so I think as a team, we need to make sure that we are conservative in where we see these agreements going in the future, to make sure that we can, we don't fall into this again. And it's a tough thing going back to the taxpayer and saying, remember that budget we passed, hey, we weren't able to meet it. But I think what CAO Proust is also saying tonight is that they're going to try and they're going to work hard, but there may be, through the year, they'll be able to give us updates, but there may be some issues in the following year. Let's hope they're not to the extent of $1.85 million next year as they were this year. With all that being said, are there any other questions or comments?
I guess one comment, which is, and I'll use it loosely, not to be critical, but it's very specific. And so is it too prescriptive in the way it's stated? And is there a potential step, if it would be of any benefit, to identify, of course, this is the intention that's on the table, and to give staff time to say, in reflecting on this, what could they come back with and still negotiate around this, rather than being kind of a formal outcome? Is there any more conversation that could be had, knowing that we don't want to carry forward the impact from that 1.8%, but is this too restrictive, and would staff like an opportunity to come back with us to say this is where they could come back with us at a compromise that maybe mitigates some risk?
So Councillor Kungl, the problem with that is that we have to set the tax rate, and so what we're, in terms of being prescriptive, with please aspire to hit these numbers from these places with a backup in the 462,500. But if we're to say not to pass that, but we would then be moving the tax rate around and then not sending it back. So this is what staff have recommended in terms of trying to compensate for that 1.85 million in excess staffing costs from the previous year.
So if I may further maybe clarify, not to kind of leave it too loose-ended, but we've deferred some items to March 8th. I'm not sure if staff, and I could direct the question to staff, if there's an appetite to kind of consider it, which is, knowing that this is on the table and is perhaps being favored, would staff like just a deferral of this until we can address it on March 8th if it's not holding up other pieces?
CAO Proust, there's a question with regards to a deferral of this piece, and if there's other options that may be able to be provided around that date.
Through you, Mayor Nuttall, to Councillor Kungl and members of committee. While this isn't my recommended outcome, Mayor Nuttall, what I would say to Council is I think staff would prefer clarity of direction instead of ambiguity. And I don't believe you're going to get clarity on March 8th or March 15th, Councillor Kungl. This is going to be some heavy lifting from your staff. I believe that they're up to the task, but it will be indeed heavy lifting. And we won't actually know how the story ends until we basically start to finalize next year's budget, Councillor Kungl. In the interim, If there are challenges, financial or otherwise, we will certainly report back to Council on what they look like and how we propose to mitigate them if we are having challenges. So
Okay.
by way of direction, I think your staff would prefer clear direction, and there's no reason to defer it.
Okay, and thank you for the clarity and the dialogue.
Thank you, Councillor Kungle. Any other questions or comments? Seeing none, all those in favor of the amendment on the floor? It's approved. Being able to keep track of everything that we've debated and deliberated on this evening. Before we proceed, I just want to give some context to this evening versus the rest of the budget. What we've completed so far this evening is with regards to City Hall's portion of our operating budget. We haven't deliberated on any of the service partner requests or invoices, as was said in the newspaper this week. We haven't deliberated on any of the capital plan for the City of Barrie, just gone through the fee schedules and the actual City Hall controlled operating budget. So, Mr. Miller, we are at the end of the evening, and I was wondering if you could give us an update as to where we are at with regards to tonight's amendments.
Through you, Mayor Nuttall. So for city operations, we started at 0.88%, and after the amendments tonight, we're now down to 0%.
Thank you. So we have essentially eliminated the city operation tax increase. It took a long time and a lot of amendments to get there, but that's what's being completed this evening. What will be talked about tomorrow evening is all of the infrastructure-related requests and the funding of those infrastructure requests, including the DIRF, the Designated Infrastructure Renewal Fund. And on March the 8th, we will be deliberating on the service partners. So members of our public service, I want to say thank you so very much for all of the work that you've put in. It is not, there's a lot of labor, time, and love that's put into ensuring that this all goes ahead and works well. And to the support for our council over the last 5 weeks as we've been going through the budget. Thank you to all of the staff in the clerk's office, through our EMT, and certainly as that filtered on down, thank you for all of the work that you've done. And to members of council, thank you for coming tonight prepared, ready, and able to make decisions. I know they're not always going to be unanimous, but I think that everyone has come to the table from the same place as trying to ensure that we have an incredible city going forward. So thank you for that. We will now adjourn.
That was the update from ongoing budget proceeding. Thanks for watching.